Well, good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Such a pleasure to be here as we lock something great down tonight and, of course, get to unlock Africa's potential. My name is Bola Ray from Ghana, and I'm happy to be here with distinguished ladies and gentlemen as well. Well, it's a packed panel, I must say, as we look at the future of Africa and how to advance it. While helping me bring some perspective to this discussion this evening, ladies and gentlemen, I have my great sister, Hafou Touré, a visionary founder and CEO of HTS Partners. Hafou, happy to be here with you.
Thank you.
And also, Tshepo Mahloele, the astute chairman of Harith General Partners. Tshepo, great to have you as well, as always. And Sérgio Pimenta is the esteemed regional vice president for Africa at the International Finance Corporation, IFC, and the U.S. ambassador, a woman who has great staff, unwavering support for Africa as well, Jessica Davis-Barr. Excellency, you most welcome, and we thank you for your commitment. Well, again, my name is Bola Ray, and I'm happy to be moderating this. I really want to dig in and start off with you, Hafou.
Yeah.
With all that's happening on our continent, we really want to see the advancement of Africa. People like you and I are at the forefront. We are right there taking the stage, and a big thank you to Bridgewater, to Global Citizen as well. But Hafou, I want to start with you.
Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest opportunities right here on the continent for African entrepreneurs today from where you sit?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the question, because I think there's so many opportunities. The key first is to understand what African entrepreneurs need to be doing. First, they need to focus on providing solutions. Solutions to what? To problems that Africans are facing. And these solutions could come in different forms. It can improve our day-to-day lives, but it could also actually transform and improve our lives for the better. So there's so many sectors where we can see these improvements happening. There's agtech. We see that 60% of the continent is working in agriculture. So how do we improve it? I don't understand how we are, like so many generations and generations have been shopping in the same markets, and hundreds of years later, we're still shopping in those same type of markets where we go and beg for different prices. Like, we need to modernize the way we look at agriculture. We need to also make it sexy and appealing to the youth, because we do have 40% of the African continent that is under 15. So how do we make sure that they can go into agriculture, that they are attracted to agriculture, and that it's a business that they feel like they can succeed in, right? So agtech is one. There's fintech. Mobile payment, we see that there's high penetration of cell phones. So how do we make sure that we can actually process payment? But beyond that, let's look at lending, saving. How do we make sure that we are making those areas happen? E-commerce, growing middle class. So now that's like peak for e-commerce, because people want to do things easily. They want things to be delivered. So how do we develop our e-commerce? It's technology, it's infrastructure. We need those spaces. Healthcare. I mean, we've seen with COVID the importance of having things like telehealth. So it goes back to technology. So all of these opportunities are there, and I'm so happy that we're having this conversation with everyone around the table, because we're here for the IDA replenishment. Let's think through some numbers, right? IDA 20 was about 93 billion. We're all here to get to 120 billion for the IDA 21. But look at, like, for example, SMEs need in Africa is estimated at around $330 billion. So even if all of the IDA funding was to go into Africa, all of it was to go into SME, it would only be about 1/3 of the actual need. So we need everyone around the table. We need the private sector, we need the public sector, we need DFIs, we need entrepreneurs, and we need everyone to come in with these solutions. So
interesting perspective from you, Hafou, and certainly we'll get back to you about making agriculture sexy. That's something insightful, and we need to encourage people to scale up their business as well.
Yes.
But I really want to go to the International Finance Corporation and go to Sérgio. Sérgio, how is the IFC working to attract more private investment? I mean, Hafou talked about it. We need to get people rallying around to make sure that that is possible. But how do you do that in terms of getting more private investment into sectors like energy, infrastructure, and innovative financing models? How do you do that at IFC?
Thank you very much, Bola. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be here with this distinguished panelists, and I think your question is really spot on for the theme of this event, right? And I would build a bit on what Hafou was saying. She really mentioned the role that the private sector plays in the development of Africa. And when we see today's economy, today's global situation, we really see that the private sector can, and the private sector is actually stepping up. And we need to support that. So the role of IFC, the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, the role that we have is to really mobilize more private sector into Africa and into emerging markets. And I cover operations in Africa, so I'll talk about the continent which I think really needs the most of that type of support. And how do we do that? We really try to address what we think are some of the gaps that we can see in the current setting. First of all, we really work on creating new opportunities, new projects that can be financed, because there's always a lot of discussion about, oh, there's financing here, but where are the projects to be financed, right? And there's projects there, but they cannot seem to match. So we're trying to work on the project side to create initiatives, create platforms, create mechanisms that allow bigger projects to happen, better projects to happen, so that they can be financed and they can have an impact and they can be delivered by the private sector. Then we really try to mobilize resources to get there. And that's really one of the efforts that we've been doing. IFC, over the last 5 years, has mobilized about $70 billion, of which about a quarter in Africa, more than a quarter has been in Africa. So what we do is that for $1 that we finance, then we bring in with us additional dollars from other partners that want to invest in Africa, but that might not necessarily know how to do it, or might be concerned by a certain number of risks, and they feel that by coming with us, working with us, they can come and they can have better operations in Africa. So that's really what we've been doing. And you asked me my last point about how we are innovative. We're innovative by trying to promote, to develop instruments and tools that didn't exist before. And it's from green financing, from green bonds, from developing capital markets, from doing a lot of what we call originate to distribute. So we originate financing transactions and then we distribute it by mobilizing. By a number of those operations that we can do, by trying also to bring in instruments that are not available to private sector. And that's where you talk about IDA. IDA plays a very important role. We have a window of IDA that is a window for the private sector that both IFC and MIGA, the guarantee institution of the World Bank Group, can deploy. And we are using that window to de-risk a number of projects, so that when investors, whether national, regional, or from the other parts of the continent or from around the world, come and want to invest in Africa and they feel that the risks are too high, we can de-risk partially these projects, which then encourage them to invest more and to contribute more. So that's part of the things that we've been
doing.
Great
submission there, Sergio. And certainly I'm happy that you're working with IDA, the International Development Assembly, to make sure that we bridge the gap. Earlier on, we had the CEO of Bridgewater talking about India, China taking advantage of such initiatives, and now they are out of it. I believe it's Africa's time, and the time is now. Which is why I want to, get back to you, Tshepo, on this. I know that Harith is doing a lot right here on the continent, especially in West Africa. We know you're South African. You're out there and doing a lot. But tell us, what are you doing in terms of infrastructure investment? Tell us some of the things that you've done in the key sectors. We mentioned backstage about getting into media, into financing IPPs. But here's the stage. Tell us that great story of Harith.
No, thanks for that, and thanks for having us. Thanks for having this, to share ideas about really what needs to be done. I think the truth of the matter is that there are things being done by a whole lot of entities, a whole lot of people, and a whole lot of organizations. Yeah. Here what IFC is doing, and what others are meant to do. But the truth of the matter is that it's not enough is being done to sort of try and address the whole sort of challenges that the continent is finding itself in, especially with the large amount of youth that we have. This youth development, how are we going to make it realize into something that's valuable and that works for the continent, or how are we going to meet the hopes and aspirations of those? And I think that's where we sort of look at what we are doing. Especially, when we're talking about infrastructure, we reiterate this all the time, until we get the infrastructure of the continent, right? The ability to travel, to communicate, the ability to sort of like be competitive. We are never going to be able to like get the continent to compete. We are never going to be able to achieve the types of growth, the inclusive sort of like, the inclusivity that we need to bring to bear that. So our whole sort of like mantra is based on the fact that we need to get the core infrastructure of the continent built, developed, and done. The challenge you find is that with infrastructure, it's a long-term game. You're not having enough long-term capital coming to do that. And that's where the continent finds itself in a, I think, in a bother. That is not happening. We are therefore then always like trying to catch up. We don't have sufficient of everything. But the sad thing is that we believe that the continent is not a poor place. And we think it's by time that I think Africans realize the inherent value that they have and have the type of policies and leadership that's able to unlock the value that they have, because until they start sort of like being at the forefront of driving those programs for their own value, we're always going to be on a position whereby, they say the good Lord helps those who help themselves. So we need to first get African capital, we need to get African resources to work for the continent so that we can then get all the additional capital that can then see the continent not as a basket case, but as an economic opportunity. And that's what we have aspired to do for the past couple of 18, 20 years in terms of what we do at Harith, to show that you can invest in infrastructure on a long-term basis and still have a return for that capital that does that. And I think that's what we aspire to.
And great job, I must say, that you're doing right here on the continent. This morning, we went for a boat trip, and our tour guide was telling us about Côte d'Ivoire being the largest exporter of cocoa. And of course, that is all for us to know. But you ask yourself, are we adding value to it? Are we able to do that to our cocoa and export? And also, are we producing chocolates here? Ghana is doing that for gold as well. Can we add value? And I love it as we strengthen that public-private partnership, and which is what will take me to my next speaker to get into it. You're doing so well here, Ambassador Jessica Davis-Barr, strengthening that relationship between Côte d'Ivoire and the US. How are you able to do that, and how has it been for you?
Thank you. You talk about the public-private partnership. So
Correct.
This is the public side of the partnership. President Biden has said many times, the world is at an inflection point. We are at a critical moment, and what we do now will make a difference for generations to come. It's a very difficult moment. People around the world are struggling, but when one suffers, we all suffer. And so we must find new and better ways to work together to alleviate that suffering. Also, when one succeeds, we all succeed. When each person has the tools and resources they need for success, we all can be successful. So the United States has an affirmative development agenda in being the public side of that public-private partnership. We are proud to be the single largest historical about focusing on today, but also looking at the aspirations of the future. We focused all of our strategies around 3 core pillars: people, peace, and prosperity. First of all, focusing on the people, listening. What do the people need? How can we deliver for the people? What are the institutions that we need to strengthen in order to deliver for the people? We've been focused on sub-national development, so we have extremely strong relationships at the national level. And we're also looking at how we can build people-to-people exchanges at the regional level in Côte d'Ivoire, throughout the regions, at the state level of the United States. How do we build partnerships? There are some states. We had a visit to Silicon Valley where we met with the government of California. California is a larger economy than many of the world's countries. By partnering California with different regions in Côte d'Ivoire, we have the opportunity to make these personal relationships matter. And when we do that, then we can show how much the United States can do and contribute when people feel invested. And you need to be able to have those person-to-person engagements. We signed a commercial investment agreement with Côte d'Ivoire this year. We opened the first commercial office of the US government, of the Department of Commerce here in Abidjan this year. We've created a center of excellence to be a hub for economic and commercial activity because that's where Côte d'Ivoire is. We need to show up like our partners. We need to show up in a dynamic way and to be able to be proactive and incentivize the kinds of investment that matter.
That's so great. I mean, sustainable opportunities indeed. And I love the way you're bringing the two countries together with all that you're doing. But in all of this, we know that we have to mitigate the risk. That is why I want to bring you back in, Sergio. How are we able to do it? The IFC is doing it so well, but walk us through. How can we, as entrepreneurs, as private investors, with you working closely together, mitigate risk?
Financial institution, development financial institution, but a financial institution nonetheless, we really put risk at the core of our work. Right? So assessment of risk is important, both the real risk and the perceived risk. And I have to say that one of the aspects in Africa that is very important, there's a lot of perceived risk that cannot be given, we cannot get rid of because of lack of data. So having data, having information is very important. And this is one of the parts the master was mentioning, public-private partnerships. I think one of the roles of public sector is also to help us gather that data that I don't know, it's working? Okay. The data that helps us assess the risk. Then, as I was mentioning, then we will focus on real risk and try to de-risk projects by taking first losses, by reducing the pricing that financial institutions might ask to take a number of risks when they invest. And so by having concrete solutions, then we can attract more investors to come in and more investors to have a big impact on the development of Africa. So that's really how we do this. And we do it in a way that we bring different partners and we assess also the risk appetite of the different partners. And so by working together, we are able to have a bigger impact in the countries that we operate.
Well, thank you. I'll come to you, Hafou, again. And this time is about startups and technologies.
Yes.
We have a lot of the youth going in there and they want that backing,
yes,
that finance to actually scale up their businesses. Mm-hmm. From where you sit as a finance person, how can we scale up? For many businesses, for startups, what is the way to go for the youth out there?
Yes, I'm glad you started with the finance point because I think access to capital is key. And I will say that for a lot of the countries, at least in the West African region, there has been an increase in debt financing. So whether it's microfinance, whether it's bank, and whether it's different institution, even mesofinance institution looking to lend to companies. But when we're talking about startups, when we're talking about innovation, we need actually to diversify the type of instruments that are available to them. Because when a startup starts, the first type of money that they need actually is that love capital, love money that we call it. And we need to make it a bit more formal. So we already have it in our institutions or even in our DNA to help a brother and uncle here, someone with, fonds de commerce on appelle, like just a little bit of cash to get them started, right? But it's never institutionalized, so it's never actually enough for them to actually do something substantive, right? So how do we make sure that this love money and capital is actually real capital that is actually helping build that business? And how do we do that? It's the high net worth, it's even anyone in the middle class that has residual income that steps out and say, oh, I'm not gonna be another entrepreneur or go into real estate. I'm just gonna finance a very good startup. So for example, I'm part of the founding member of the Côte d'Ivoire Business Angel Network, and that's exactly what we're doing, right? Another thing is different type of capital that needs to be available is then equity. It's different type of financing that will help
So you mentioned angel investment, yes, equity.
Yes.
Family members can also get in there and help.
Yeah.
In a minute, I would like to hear from Excellency Jessica Ba and also from Tshepo. Tshepo, I'll start off with you as we wrap up all of this discussion. For you, what is the future for Africa like now, from where you sit?
I think from where I I stand and from what we are doing, there is not a shortage of things to do on the continent. What there is a shortage of is enough risk capital to take a long-term bet on the continent. But the opportunities are, we discuss with our teams that in terms of like what we are doing, especially if you look at infrastructure, there's going to be more than enough to do for the next 100 years and not enough capital. So the big thing I think we believe needs to be addressed is the partnerships are key. And then we're seeing that's sort of like coming to the fore a lot. But we need then to reduce that cost of capital that the continent gets to enable to unlock the viability of those projects.
Well said, indeed. And also we'll have the last word from Excellency Jessica Ba. Jessica, tell us about, yes, the strengthening again, but most importantly, the collaboration.
So that it's really critical as we look into the future is how we can focus on technology and how can we leverage digitization. We need to be able to be looking not just at tomorrow, but 10 years from now, 100 years from now. It's going to be very difficult to build investment and to attract international finance. How can the governments work together to be able to create that environment that de-risks investment? And by layering that investment to the core principles, we are creating an enabling environment for trade and the future.
Well said. And an enabling environment we all need. Africa is rising. The time is now for many. The future is digital, and many also saying that the future is Africa. A big thank you to our panel. Please, a round of applause for them for giving us all the insights. I believe that after this assembly, we're all going with something great to make a difference. The word is impact. Let's go out there and impact the world. Thank you. It's Africa's time. Thank you.